if you are not truthful, you can never be a success. He took me under his wings and he said, you have to write an essay every day. Current generation doesn't know that Bangladesh was a part of Pakistan.
Assalamu alaikum ji. My name is Faisal Bari. I joined the Lahore University of Management Sciences in 1991 as a research associate, rejoined after my PhD in 98, and have been teaching there in economics and now education faculty also since then. Currently, I'm the interim dean for the School of Education at the Lahore University of Management Sciences. Babar Sahab, thank you so very much for taking the time.
It's a pleasure.
Babar Sahab, let me start by asking, because we've started from School of Education. So, what was the motivation behind setting up the School of Education?
You know, as you know, I've been associated with lunch from the thought onwards, and we started as a business school, and then as we grew and our resources improved, we set up the School for Social Sciences, kept on adding new subjects there, and then later on we also added computer science and mathematics, because those are essential subjects. Then law as a department. And then having an industrial background, I thought unless Pakistan produced new knowledge and technology, the amount of management and other factors that we already were sort of teaching young men and women were not enough to improve the economy of Pakistan unless you brought in new ideas, new technology, new research. So then we had almost a 3-year program to see if a School of Science and Engineering was needed, and all indications were that it was necessary for Pakistan's progress. So we put up the School of Science and Engineering, and by the grace of God, in the last 15 years, it has come up. It has produced very good undergraduates, graduates, and some now PhDs. Then, you know, reflecting on the weaknesses in Pakistan as to why we are where we are, and could we have done better. And one factor, you know, just would not go away from our attention, and that was if we had invested more on education at all levels, primary, secondary, tertiary, postgraduate, we would have we would be in a different level of development. And then I thought that, you know, education is not just producing teachers or dabbling in pedagogy, but people who would think as to how to overcome this deficiency that we have incurred through neglect of the subject education into and neglect of investment in education, giving it the right importance. And I said, let us now produce a cadre of young men and women who would, in coming years, take this up as their main objective to bring an education onto the front burner of country's development. So that was the whole purpose of it, and I hope you will be able to do that.
So just looking forward with that notion, what would be your vision for the school?
Well, the whole idea is really that you keep on seeing, you know, studying from the rest of the world as to how and why they are ahead of us, and what have they done different to what we have done, and how we can leapfrog and make up for the deficiency. It won't happen in a year, it won't happen in a decade, it might take 25, 30, 40 years, but if the country has to move forward, you have to aim, you know, we have to look that far forward.
And if I was to ask you, say, 15 years down the road, 20 years down the road, if you looked at the School of Education and said, okay, this was a success, it had the right impact, what would that be, Babison?
Well, it would be that that they would come up with new ideas and also be assertive. We take part in the national debate on education, and have conviction that this is the way to go, and then to interact with, there are hundreds of education institutions in the country. Many are for profit, some are not for profit. Pick up the ones that they think they have the right chemistry with, and see if they can leverage their thoughts with them, convert them to their way of thinking. And because my whole purpose in life has been that I don't want to be a loner. I want to build up a large team of people and give them credit and give them empowerment to take the message forward. So I think there is a tremendous opportunity. I give you a sad example that when Dr. Salam got the Nobel Prize, he was applauded all over the world, and especially the Muslim world. He went from Morocco to Indonesia and meeting all those people, and he put a proposition to them that the petrol dollars has started coming in, that why don't you allocate $20 billion and set up 4 or 5 universities, one in Cairo, one in Baghdad, one in Tehran, one in Pakistan, one in Malaysia. And he said, in 20 years' time, you don't have to look to anybody else. You will be producing new knowledge, new discoveries, and this is where you will be. So put this investment there rather than into other fancy things. And unfortunately, there was nobody who understood his language. And you also know that he had the authority to put up this new institute, which was named after him. He brought the whole proposal to Pakistan, and the Pakistan government turned it down. The Italians jumped at it, and it's now that famous institute in Trieste. So we have nobody else to blame for our backwardness.
The School of Education also is very honored and privileged, of course, to have your father's and your uncle's name. So what qualities of theirs were what inspired you, and it would be wonderful if those are reflected in the school?
Well, both were self-made. My grandfather died. He set up business in Firozpur in 1875, a small store to cater to the needs of the British Army there. Firozpur was a large cantonment because as soon as the British conquered Punjab, they wanted to have their presence, of course, in Lahore on the administrative side, but the firepower was in Firozpur. They wanted to keep, in case things did not go their way, that they would have a substantial number of soldiers to enforce their administration, their will. So, and he was a small-time businessman, but very hardworking, and he had 2 sons, my uncle and my father, and they were still in their. My uncle was maybe 18 years old, and my father was 14 years old. And in 1900, he was on a visit to Lahore. I was reading in some of the family documents, and he died all of a sudden, my grandfather. So these 2 brothers then inherited the business, and the business really was goodwill. he left a very good name, very good friends who helped them consolidate their business and to help them build it up. So they worked hard from 1900 to, well, I was born in 26 and I started, you know, sort of benefiting from their earnings and their largesse from 1930 onwards. And they never looked back. And they were people who were very modest in their demeanor. And, you know, though Punjab and particularly Lahore had very prominent Muslims, but there was no wealth. The wealth was in lands or in titles or in offices. Uh, and, uh, and of course, the moneyed people in Lahore were non-Muslims, particularly Hindus. So my father and my uncle, they built up considerable wealth and they invested their wealth in property. But apart from accumulating, you know, resources, they built up a good reputation of people who were good to their word. They had no business dealings with anybody here. This was only, they were dealing with the British Army. So they were not beholden to any of the local functionaries or government or anything else. And they were available to anybody who needed any support or help or anything like that. And they reached out to these people to look after them, to entertain them, to applaud them. And so whoever was in government at, you know, before partition, they, and that applied across the board, particularly among the Muslim leagues, because my uncle died in 42 before Muslim League emerged. But my father knew Mr. Jinnah well because he had consulted him on many legal issues pertaining to the business. But he would be available to Mr. Jinnah for anything that he wanted to be done, you know. And so he was very, you know, I would say he was, and the British government also recognized that here was somebody who they didn't realize that he was self-educated. I mean, he was only educated, went to school to the class 6 or 7, but he learnt English, not only to speak but to write, because he had people working for him who were very proficient in language. He learnt himself from them, educated himself. And when the Reserve Bank of India was being formulated, my father, you know, because of his work with the British government, the British Army, used to go to Delhi often, and he was introduced to the Finance Minister, Sir James Grigg. And I found out only recently, reading some of the papers, that Sir James Grigg had written to me on my father's demise that he spotted my father as somebody who was trustworthy and reliable. And he said, I nominated him to be a director of the Reserve Bank of India as a founding member. So, I mean, that was the kind of this thing. And one thought that, you know, my father passed away in 61, my uncle passed away in 42, that we as a family today had, by the grace of God, got resources. And if we were to have something, some contribution to an institution, I thought it was my duty to honor their names. I'm doing the same thing for my mother in the area of Urdu and Persian in the school of, in the Gurmani school.
Now, changing slightly from the school itself, when you think of education and you look at somebody, just say when you meet someone, who do you think is an educated person? Is it personal qualities? Is it other things, well-read? What are the things that you think make a person educated?
Overall behavior. saw somebody sent me a very interesting page today of he narrates um of the people that he has come across, and he said there was a function, and there was he, there was a lady who was one of the invitees, and she was talking to a person in a very domineering way. And she had a health she was either a doctor or somebody concerned with, and she was sort of monopolizing the conversation. And later on, she went to the host and he said, "Who was I talking to?" He said he was so and so, a Nobel laureate. And she said, "What is his specialty?" Healthcare. He would not let this other person know that what his background was, what his knowledge was. He let the other person feel comfortable. And I think the real sign of an educated person is that he's very modest, and he's ever learning. And then later on, he went and talked to this Nobel laureate, and he said, "I'm sorry that my friend was making a nuisance of herself." And he said, "No. I was learning a lot of new things from her." So if you have an open mind and say that and act, not only say, but behave in a way that you are you have an open mind and you don't know everything.
So, these qualities, I'm sure these are also ones that over your lifetime you have also been using in and internalized in your personality as well. But how does one teach these in a university or a school setting? What is it that we need to do as educators to make sure that such qualities are passed on to the students?
I think by example. I mean, you are a very well-read people, and there are hundreds of examples that you cite. But I can give you a very interesting thing. I got to know Dr. Salam fairly well because he came to Lahore, and my brother's house was he had an open house, so anybody who came visited him. And also his Salam's brother was in business. His name was Hamid. Bit of a nuisance. He was always sort of badgering people and trying to throw his weight around because he was Salam's brother. So he used to come to my office regularly. Anyway, so I met Salam, and he had just got the Nobel Prize, and to show off that I knew a little bit about physics, I said, "You have this, you have the left-hand side and the right-hand side." He said, "Tenu te bada kuch aanda, you know a lot." Instead of telling me that this is not child's play, but he wanted to encourage me that and say that you know a hell of a lot of physics, which I did. But I mean, that is the sign of a great man.
So, if you look back on your own educational career, initially at Ahsan and then beyond, which are the teachers that you remember, and what qualities of those teachers make you remember them fondly?
Well, I've talked about it before also, that Ahsan, when I joined Ahsan, it was a chief's college, meant to raise young men who would forever be faithful to the British. They came from the Indian states, Nawabs, Rajas, Maharajas, and the feudal lords of Punjab, the Noons and the Tiwanas and the Qurayshis. And I was the oddball there because I came from a business community. And the only reason I could get admitted was I was smuggled in, not under false pretenses, because my mother's side were courtiers Maharaja Ranjit Singh, and her uncle Fakir Jalaluddin was one of the first students at Ahsan College.
Right.
And then later on, my mother's brother Fakir Sirajuddin was also studied. And then my eldest sister was married to the Peers of Shajuna. So the Peers also had that they were in that book of Punjab chiefs. But anyway, so the people who were selected as teachers at Eastern College were selected on the basis of being good tutors who would watch, guide, mentor these young men so that they would behave properly, conduct themselves properly. Of course, the 3 R's were there. I mean, reading, writing, arithmetic, geography. And Edson College, along with Mayo College and other chief colleges of India, had their own diploma. And that was sort of the end point of the education. And after that, you could qualify for a government service, or you could go back to your state and be recognized as a state chief or whatever it was. And so these people, and they were half the teachers at Edson were Muslims, and the other half were Sikhs and Hindus. We had a Maulvi to teach us about his religion. We had a Pandit there. We had a Bhai, a Sikh, who would teach about. And Persian was a compulsory language, and everybody except for 2 Hindus, they were studying Sanskrit and Hindi out of 80 students. So this was and I kept in touch with all of them before partition. Although I left college in 43, I would go back and pay my respects to them. Then after partition, those who migrated to India, and I went to India a number of times, the ones that were still in Delhi, because many went to Patiala, and Maharaja Patiala set up a parallel school to Edson College called Yadavindra Public School to accommodate all the students, non-Muslim students whom I had to go to India. So I would go and meet with them, and I treated them as my fathers. Lot of respect, and they gave us love.
And there's one which is in-class teaching, jo the teacher does, but there's a lot that you were talking about which is out of class.
Oh
also.
yes, absolutely.
How was that structured in some ways?
Well, you know, every teacher at Edson during my days had to supervise games. So they were on the playing field. They were selected, whether you were a hockey player or you were a tennis player or a cricketer. Some of the top cricketers of that time, amateur cricketers. I remember Jagdish Lal and his brother Mooni Lal. They played for an organization called Northern India Cricket Association, NICA. That took part in Ranji Trophy. And both brothers, Jagdish Lal was a teacher. Savara, another Hindu gentleman, he came from University of London, and he was captain of the London tennis team, university. Then we had Zulfikar Ali Shah, who was principal during my time. He was captain of the cricket team at Government College. So these were the people who were as good on the playing field as they were. They said they were watching, and they would correct you, and so the whole idea was that you become a whole person rather than a nerd.
So it almost feels like an apprenticeship model. Almost.
Yeah. It could do that because that number was a small one.
Ji, bilkul. So what are the things that we can bring into our modern universities and setups, Baba Sahib?
I think what we need to do is, you've been to Oxford, and you have these tutorials where you had a lecture in a hall of maybe 200 people, and then you broke up into small groups, and you were assigned to a certain faculty person, and you would go and talk in a small group, and he would give you an assignment, you read, others would see and criticize. I think we need to encourage more of that, that this personal contact and mentorship, because to test, how well you have memorized your papers, that is no knowledge at all. I keep on telling students that 90% what they have learnt at Lumps, they've already forgotten by the time they leave the place. So pick up those ideas which will last with you for the rest of your life.
There's your biography also has a very large theme which is learning from others. I'm just wondering if you could distill it and say, how do you learn from others? When you interact with others, what is it? What's the learning mode, and how do you seek what to take and what not to take?
Well, the first thing is you've got to be hungry. You've got to be curious, inquisitive. And in a company with elders where you are Mr. Nobody, you just keep on listening. And as you grow and as you are recognized, then you can ask questions. And I've never hesitated asking questions, just to be curious. I give an example. Sir Zafrullah Khan, from the age of 6 that I can remember, he was always visiting our house, and whenever he came to Lahore, he came for a meal. And it was mandatory for me, if I was not at school, to sit at the table. Just be there. My father was very, very meticulous. So Zafrullah saw me grow up, and of course I sort of kept on growing in my relationship with him. And of course it culminated in my being invited by him to be on the Pakistan delegation as one of the minions in the first Pakistan delegation to the United Nations. So in those days, the United Nations was split up into 2 locations. One was Lake Success, where the committee meetings would take place, and the other was Flushing Meadows, which had a big hall facility for the preliminary session where all the delegates could get together. So we used to sit in the car and drive to these places, and I was living on my own, paying for my own hotel and my own meals, but had the privilege of carrying the bag for the Pakistan delegation. So one day, and I knew that Choi Saab knew Dr. Iqbal very well because they were more or less same age, contemporaries, and they were also members of the Punjab Legislative Council. So I asked him, I said, how good was Dr. Iqbal as a lawyer? I knew as a poet he was very well known. And he said he was not interested in the profession at all. And he told me, he said he would call his Munshi Tahardeen, who was the father or uncle of Dr. Shahriyar, the cardiologist. And he would call him and he said, Munshi ji, whenever we have enough resources till the end of the month, don't take any more cases. Whether it was the 10th of the month or the 15th of the month, no more cases. I will only entertain a new client after the 1st of the month because I have enough money to feed my family and myself. So this is part of, one never knew. And I narrated it to Javed Iqbal. I said, this is what Zafrullah Khan told me about your father. So, I never hesitated in asking questions. To tell you another thing, because of my working closely with Prince Philip, for 30 years I spent time as WWF.
Gee.
So we, would travel to different places. Normally we would eat, in the evenings. I was staying in the same hotel. And this was the time when his son Andrew was dating something called Something Koo, an actress. So I asked him, I said, what is she like? He said, I met her, very attractive. But only you can do that if you have known him. At another time, in between our various meetings, Gorbachev and his wife Raisa had come as guests of the Queen and Prince Philip to Windsor Castle. So I don't know why, but I asked him, I said, what is Raisa like? He said, she couldn't stop talking. Now, you won't get this kind of information from anybody, and this was something that, and he was comfortable because he knew, that I had worked with him for 30 years. I was not somebody who would go and quote him and do this. I hope this is not quoted. But I mean, that is the kind of passion I had for learning, inquiry, and all that.
A lot of people now say, and we see that also, that the habit of reading and writing, expressing yourself is going down. This is the digital age. People's concentration levels are going down. What role has reading played in your learning from others struggle?
You know, just to share my own examination sort of result with you, I got a compensated failure in English in my senior Cambridge because I did so well in history and geography and science and mathematics that Cambridge University decided to give me a third class certificate. And then I joined HSC at H.N. College, and Mr. Kernan, who was probably one of the most intellectual faculty members that H.N. ever had. He was a fellow at Trinity College, Cambridge, historian. He was our, class in charge for HSC. So he took me under his wings and he said, you have to write an essay every day. And you've got to read 3 books a week. And so I followed that meticulously for 2 years. And that sort of got me on. But I got interested in history because he was professor of history at Cambridge. He was a fellow in history. And then I started reading biographies of people that I was interested in. And so that is something that I have cherished, enjoyed, and learned a hell of a lot.
And that habit continues, Babar?
Yes. It's very much there. 10 days ago, he sent me the last book that Jamshed Market had written as the ambassador, called Cover Point. And so I spent 2 wakeful evenings to finish that book, and now I've put it into circulation. I've given it to another ambassador who served under Jamshed Marker.
You've led a very active, very busy life. So even during the busiest of times, your reading habits were still
Yeah. I mean, if you see my bed, next to the bed, there's a pile of books. I keep on switching from one to the other. If I get bored with one, I go to the other one, and one language or the other. So it's Urdu or English.
I'll switch now to some of the current debates that are going on in education and have your take on them. One of the big debates in Pakistan continues to be what languages should we teach our children and what should be the medium of instruction. So we've been vacillating between Urdu, English, and sometimes there is mention of a mother tongue. So you also obviously are proficient in Persian as well. What's your take? How should we educate which languages and sort of at what stage?
I would say the easiest would be to educate them in their mother tongue, because that comes easiest. They don't have to struggle it, and from there they can always translate into whatever is needed. I see it in my great grandchildren. They are living in California, and their nanny is Spanish. I mean, she speaks Spanish. She's South American. And these 2 boys, because they speak English in the house, so English is their. But without any effort, they act as interpreter between the nanny and the mother. in Spanish. And my granddaughter was telling me that last they took a vacation, they went to Mexico, and their 4-year son was interpreting for them with the Mexicans. So this is, I mean, language comes very easy to youngsters, but as a kind of as a usage rather than something that is forced upon them.
And Bab Sahib, which foreign languages in Pakistan? Because geographically we are a very interesting position where we have Iran on one side, China is very close. We have ties to the Arabic world, obviously, as well. And English has been something that's been with us. So which foreign languages do you think should we bring into our early years?
Well,
also?
English today is a universal language. It doesn't belong to any country today. It's spoken everywhere. I would say, I mean, certainly Urdu should be spoken by all, and not only spoken, but written and enjoyed. And I would opt for Persian as the first language, because Persian itself is kind of, I would say, it's one of the mothers of the Urdu language. Being Sanskrit, Turkish, everybody claims that, you know, they have a part of Urdu. But Persian, I think, would be, Arabic would be my last choice. It's totally a language which, of course, we need to study Quran. I can read the Quran without understanding, but that, to my mind, is only half the job. And I read the translation. Of course, you can't get away. I mean, Quran is something that is the foundation of our religion. You can't, you know, it's important. But to me, to read Quran, to study Quran, the most important thing is to act on what Quran says, not to just repeat it, you know, and verbatim to you know, to recite it is not enough. You have to act on it.
In your own household, when you were growing up, which language was the common
Urdu.
language? Urdu. And then you picked up English and Persian and Punjabi, all of them in school? Punjabi also?
English, certainly I went to Sacred Heart, so that was the first introduction, then Ahsan College, and then later on, Urdu came in later as a written language. The only examination I ever failed at Ahsan was in Urdu in the first year, because Sacred Heart had no Urdu. But later on, my mother was very keen, and during the summer holidays, she would always pick up an Urdu scholar to go with us as a tutor, and we would, you know, we talk about Iqbal, Ghalib, and others, and also about poetry.
And when did Punjabi come in?
Punjabi just picked it up, and reading Punjabi came in much, much later. I was over 70 years old when Dr. Nazir came to Packages and was with us, and he embarked on this journey of producing the 4 classic books on the Sufi poets. That is where I was first exposed to Punjabi poetry, Sufi poetry. But of course I'd heard Heer many years earlier, but that was purely for entertainment.
So you picked up Punjabi on your own at the age of 70. MashaAllah. So perhaps the second big debate right now, which is going on you've been following this, I know, is about a single education system and a uniform system across Pakistan. I would really like to have your thoughts on that. What do you think? Is it possible? What kind of a single system? The argument that is given for it is on the basis of equality, that every child should have the same opportunities. But it seems like a very strange way to provide equality.
No, I'm totally averse to it. I think you cannot force any curricula on anybody. It has to be evolutionary. It has to evolve based on the needs of the environment where the child is growing. For instance, 70% of our population and our children are growing in the rural area. There is no mention of rural life or rural issues in the textbooks, in the schools. They are never told, what a tractor is like, why are we using a tractor, what was there prior to a tractor for plowing the land, why do we plow the land, why do we need rotation, what is irrigation, why water is important, how to keep healthy, things like, I remember when I was at school, the first English Urdu book we had, the subject, the heading was Safai. I still remember the first line of it, Safai ki taarif kya ho biyan, Safai ki hain behad khubiyan, savere utho aur nahao zarur, haath aur muh rakho zarur. These things were taught to us at Ahsan College in 1934. Today, children are not told that how important it is to wash your hands. You know that the act that saved the highest number of lives was when the surgeons started washing their hands in the 1870s. So these are things which need to be taught.
So it's a differentiated curriculum according to the need
I think where people who are living in the desert, they should be told, the wonderful things that happen in the desert. Nothing grows during the summer, but when it rains, all of a sudden flowers sprout. And that is a wonder thing. How do these flower seeds remain in the soil and nature is protecting them?
So, some reflection on another important debate, which is what is the role of Islamiyat and Pakistan studies in our curriculum? Do children learn religion through that? Do they become better? Whatever the religion, do they become better by reading it in schools, or does home play a big part in this?
Well, I am totally averse to both these subjects. It's been there, I don't know, since Ziaul Haq came, and you don't see any signs of us producing good Muslims as a result of this. And the textbooks that are introduced as subjects to be taught are totally archaic. The purpose of education is to make you a better human being, not to tell you Mr. X, Y, and Z when he was born, when he died. That is irrelevant. And Pakistan studies, you can only love your country if you appreciate what is good in this country. You can't love this country because you say that it's a great country. You have to really believe in it. You have to believe that this country has given you so much. You have to see the country. You have to admire this country. And I've been talking to people at LUMS that in the two subjects in Islamiyat, we should teach Iqbal, because 90% of Iqbal's poetry is on Islam, how to be a better Muslim, history of Islam. He takes you through the whole spectrum of Islam. And in Pakistan studies, you study Jinnah and his life and the political development of the Muslim movement. I think that, of course, our current generation doesn't know that Bangladesh was a part of Pakistan. So you've got to sort of debate on this. How did we lose Bangladesh? That is a part of Pakistan studies. And then, of course, Pakistan's neighbors, Afghanistan, India is very important, China, Iran, a study about those countries, how, the role why did these people come marching through what is Pakistan today and go to Delhi and beyond Delhi? What was the attraction? So these are things that need to be learnt by the coming generation, which today they are totally unaware of. And I'm very much averse to textbooks being produced by government, because it's a very poor quality in their content and in their print, and very biased and full of corruption. And it's and that's a part of the malady of rote learning, that you are tested on what's written in the book, not on what you have understood. So this is I hope your School of Education is going to upset all this thing.
So coming back to rote learning, if I reflect back, or when you were in school, there are some things that we do learn.
Sure.
I still remember the tables and a number
Sure.
of things, etc. But then there was a whole lot which is about understanding and so on. How do we make sure that that part dominates and we don't reduce education to rote learning? What's the role of teachers in that?
I think the teacher's role should be, as I said a few minutes ago, on these tutorials, that when you have discussed a subject, you ask each one to describe it in their own language, how they have understood it. And I would go even one step further to say, if you're more comfortable in explaining in Urdu, do that. The whole idea is, have you understood what we are talking about? Forget about the words.
So I want to come back to, we have limited time, so I want to come back to the School of Education and its graduates. Most of our, education is interesting because there's a lot more women who enter the field of education than some sciences, etc. So even our current class, I think, is 70% women in the MPhil program, that is just the class that has come in. How should they think about their career as they move through this 2 years? What should they be looking for in starting to build up, thinking about the next 30, 40 years or 50 years of their career?
I think one thing you should inculcate in them, encourage them to be curious, question everything, not to accept anything that you as a faculty member narrate to them or speak to them or lecture to them. They should question you. And also encourage them to think outside the box. Could we discuss this subject in another way? Is there anything else we should be talking about? How to make the next generation better than us? What has been our failing? Whether your parents or your teachers did not fully equip you for what you are doing today, you can blame them for that, but what should you be doing so that you don't get blamed for either the people that you're teaching or your children that you're bringing up? Liberate them and encourage them to explore, to think, to read. Reading, I think, is very important, to be inquisitive.
And Ma'am, in professional life, mashallah, you've spent the entire life dealing with business also, not just education. What would be, let's say, the top 2 or 3 qualities that you think would makes a person a much better person in professional life?
Well, I would say in any life. Yesterday, a gentleman who belongs to the frontier came to see me. He retired as head of WAPDA. A very good friend of mine. And he said that one of the noblest people he ever met in Pakistan was a foreign lady who was looking after the leper colony. And she started this looking after the leper colony in Karachi, and then had a satellite thing in Malakand and all that. So he was knowing her for many years. And he said, "You have lived in Pakistan for 50 years. What one major weakness you see in Pakistanis? They're not truthful." And I think in business or any walk of life, if you are not truthful, you can never be a success. And you know, I mean, in the Quran, right in the very beginning, you know, it says "Pura tolo." Measure everything fairly. That again goes back to this thing that you have to recognize honesty and fairness in life.
You gave a reference from the Quran for honesty and truthfulness. This is slightly different from the question, but when I look at the history of Lahore, I see a lot of institutions that were created by philanthropists pre-partition. Ganga Ram and many, Dayal Singh College and many such institutions, hospitals, colleges, a lot of institutions. Post-partition, one sees a lot fewer of them in Lahore at least. I think the ethos in Karachi might be slightly different, but Lahore. Why do you think that would be the case? It's only very few people that we know of post-partition who have come in.
You know, it's new money, novo riche. They are first satisfying their needs, their wife's needs. He wants a new jewelry, they want a new car, a new house. And they don't know that these things are very frivolous. They don't last long. I mean, where you're talking of you know, big institutions, I remember, you know, the Hindus were so careful, where they're so meticulous about small things. This is before you were born. You know, this crossing Davis Road and Mall Road, which and there's a road that comes from GOR. At the Ahsan side corner, there was a watering trough for the horses that were for the Tongas.
I see. Indeed.
Some Hindu had, his name was there, I remember, had built that so that, you know, they know that the horses, the Tongas are the only means of transport, that a horse gets thirsty, and he wanted to ensure that there was water available for the horses. So these are things which our people have totally, you know, they think it is not their job, somebody else's job. And I think this is something that you need to talk in the classroom and tell those people that you have to worry about these things.
I want to thank you for your time.
No, it's been a pleasure talking to you because, you know, I mean, I've had the privilege of meeting you, interacting you all these years.
Where did you gain your knowledge of religion and Islam?
I have been a student of Sadi and of Rumi and Iqbal. And I would say that 75% of Iqbal's poetry, you know, hovers around Islam. Islam is a way of life. Islam is a way of conducting yourself in a manner that you are not only happy with yourself, you make others happy.
Basic human values
Yes.
that we should all have.
Yeah, that is a Muslim.
Yes.